The HOA president stood in my flooded living room, water up to her knees, screaming that I had done this on purpose. She was right, but not in the way she thought. 3 days earlier, she had fined me $2,000 for having a natural spring on my own property. She said I was hoarding water. She sent me an official order telling me to drain my land. So I did exactly what she told me to do. And I watched as the water from my spring washed their $1 million clubhouse away. My name is Alex Carter. And for 15 years, I had a job that most people would find pretty boring. I was a hydrologist. That's a fancy word for a water scientist. I worked for the federal government. My job was to study water systems, rivers, lakes, and underground aquifers. I made sure the water was clean and safe for people to drink. I loved the science part. I loved understanding how water moves through the earth, how it shapes the land, and how all life depends on it. What I didn't love was the politics. My job wasn't just about science. It was also about dealing with big companies and powerful people. Sometimes, those companies would want to do things that were bad for the water. They would want to dump chemicals or build in places that would hurt the environment. My job was to stop them, or at least to make them follow the rules. 2 years ago, I found out something terrible. A large farming corporation was dumping poisonous waste into a river in the Midwest. This river provided drinking water for thousands of people. I did my job. I collected the evidence. I wrote a report. I sent it to my bosses. But nothing happened. Instead of stopping the company, my bosses buried my report. They told me to forget about it. They said the company was too important to the local economy. They said making a fuss would cause problems. I couldn't do it. I couldn't just forget about it. So I did something risky. I became a whistleblower. I sent my report and my evidence to a newspaper. When the story came out, people were angry. The company was eventually fined, and the dumping stopped. But I lost my job. Oh, I wasn't officially fired for being a whistleblower. That would be illegal. But I was suddenly told that my position was no longer needed. I was given a small amount of money to leave quietly and never come back. I was 38 years old, and my career was over. The money I got was enough to start over, but just barely. I was tired of cities. I was tired of offices. I was tired of fighting with powerful people. I decided I wanted a simple life. I wanted to live somewhere quiet, where I could be alone with my thoughts. I started looking for land. I didn't want a house in a neighborhood. I wanted raw land. I wanted to build my own small place, far away from everyone. After months of searching, I found it. A 12-acre plot in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The listing called it a rugged, wooded parcel with scenic potential. The real estate agent, a young man named Mark, was very honest with me. To be frank, Mr. Carter, this land is steep and rocky, he said. It's difficult to access and even more difficult to build on. That's why the price is so low. The price was $85,000. For 12 acres, that was a steal, even for difficult land. I didn't care about it being steep. I liked the idea of being up high. I didn't care about the rocks. I just wanted peace and quiet. We walked the property. The trees were thick and tall. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. It was completely silent, except for the sound of birds and the wind in the leaves. It felt like my own private world. I signed the papers the next week. I was now the official owner of what the county maps called Parcel 1147, but what I decided to call Hawk's Perch. The first few weeks were all about planning. I hired a local excavator named Joe to come and clear a flat spot for the cabin's foundation. Joe was a man in his 60s who had lived in these mountains his whole life. After about an hour of digging, Joe shut the bulldozer down. He waved me over. "Hey, Alex, you know about the water situation up here?" he asked. I walked over. The bulldozer's blade had scraped away the dark soil, exposing gray bedrock underneath. And from cracks in that bedrock, water was seeping out. It wasn't a gushing fountain, but a steady, persistent flow. Clear, Cold water was pooling in the scraped-out area faster than the earth could absorb it. "This ain't from last night's rain," Joe said, kneeling down. "This is coming from deep down." I knelt beside him and cupped my hands in the water. I brought it to my lips. It was ice-cold and tasted incredibly pure. My scientist brain immediately kicked into gear. I looked at the rock. It was limestone. Limestone is like a giant sponge. It can hold huge amounts of water in underground aquifers. When the aquifer is full, the water pressure pushes it up through cracks in the rock, creating what's called a spring. "How much water are we talking about, Joe?" I asked. "Hard to say for sure without measuring. But this particular spot? I'd guess it puts out a couple thousand gallons a day, maybe more when it's wet. You're sitting on a natural spring, my friend." What I was going to do was exactly what my training had taught me. I was going to respect it. I immediately changed my building plans. Instead, I designed a simple system. I built a small, natural-looking pond to capture the water. I lined it with native clay and stones. The pond would hold about 2,000 gallons. I made sure the overflow had a clear, gentle channel to follow its old path down the mountain. I didn't stop the water. I just guided it. I went to the county office and got all the necessary permits. Everything was legal, permitted, and done the right way. For the next 4 months, I lived in perfect happiness. My days were simple. The spring flowed constantly, filling my pond. The overflow trickled away down the hill, following the natural drainage. Down the hill, about half a mile away, was my nearest neighbor. It was a whole neighborhood. A gated community called Grandview Estates. The piece ended on a Tuesday morning. I heard a car engine struggling on my rough dirt road. A gleaming white Lexus SUV stopped near my cabin, and a woman got out. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit and high heels. She carried a leather portfolio. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled. "Mr. Carter?" she said, her voice smooth and professional. "I'm Barbara Klein. I'm the president of the Grandview Estates Homeowners Association. I'd like to discuss a matter of mutual concern." "I'm not part of your homeowners association," I said. "My property isn't in Grandview Estates." "Of course, we respect property boundaries," she countered. "But watersheds don't care about survey lines. We've had some residents express concerns about recent activity on your land and its potential impact on our community's water security." She handed me a document filled with official-sounding language. It looked very impressive, but I knew better. An HOA has no authority over property outside its borders. "I'm curious, what legal authority does your HOA have to demand this from me?" I asked. "Water law is complex, Mr. Carter. We're not demanding, we're requesting cooperation. It's always better to work together voluntarily than to involve county regulators in a formal dispute." The threat was clear. Play along, or we'll make trouble for you with the real government. After her Lexus disappeared, I got to work. Barbara Klein wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was up to something. I spent the afternoon digging into public records. Barbara Klein was a former commercial real estate developer. She had been elected HOA president just 6 months ago, and she was the listed managing partner of a company called Alpine Springs Development, LLC. An alarm bell went off. I dug deeper into Alpine Springs Development. Its business was listed as luxury residential development. It had already purchased several parcels of land around the Grandview Estates area, and every single one of those parcels was purchased for a suspiciously low price. All of them were located within the same watershed that started at my spring. Barbara Klein wasn't an environmentalist. She was a developer. She was using her position as HOA president to pressure upstream landowners while her private company bought up the land. My spring wasn't a problem for her. It was the key to her whole plan. She needed to control it. I spent the next week buried in research. I studied North Carolina water law. I read my old property deed. I hit the jackpot. My property deed included something called riparian rights. These were old water rights that came with the land, dating back to 1901. The original deed specifically mentioned the free and uninterrupted use of the spring waters. These rights were very strong and legally protected. Even better, I confirmed that my spring qualified as waters of the United States under the Clean Water Act. That's a federal law. This was my shield. I hired Sarah Jenkins, an environmental attorney who had worked for the EPA. "Alex, this is a textbook case of regulatory harassment," Sarah said. "She has no legal leg to stand on. She'll keep pushing right up to the line, hoping you'll break first." We crafted a response that was a work of art. We provided Barbara Klein with a full environmental report, just like she wanted. But we also included a 50-page legal brief explaining the federal protections for my spring. We explained, in very clear language, that any attempt to interfere with my spring would be a violation of federal law and would be reported to the EPA. We thought this would make her back down. We were wrong. 2 days later, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from the Grandview HOA, signed by Barbara Klein. I was being fined $2,000. The reason? Unauthorized creation of an artificial water reservoir constituting a public nuisance and a flood hazard. The letter demanded I pay the fine and, within 10 business days, remediate the hazard by draining the pond and removing all flow impediments. I was angry, but Sarah was thrilled. She's just committed a crime. This is fraud. She's using the mail to send a fraudulent fine. But let's not play our hand yet. The harassment campaign began. I started getting anonymous complaints filed against me with every county agency. I was being watched. I decided to turn the tables. I wanted to know what Barbara Klein's company was really planning. I uncovered the investor prospectus for a project called The Sanctuary at Grandview. The plan was for a 50-lot, ultra-luxury subdivision worth over $50 million. The entire marketing plan was built around one thing: water. The brochures promised direct access to pristine, natural artesian spring water. They were selling a dream using my spring. The project timeline showed they were under immense pressure. If they didn't secure the water rights soon, the whole project would collapse. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I checked the weather forecast. A major storm system was moving in from the coast. 5 to 7 inches of rain was expected over 36 hours. That's when the final letter arrived. It was printed on what looked like official county letterhead with a gold embossed seal. It was an emergency compliance order. The letter claimed that the County Department of Environmental Services had determined my pond was in imminent flood danger due to the forecasted storm. It ordered me to immediately drain all collected water and remove all barriers to natural flow within 24 hours. It was signed by a Deputy Director Anderson. I immediately called the actual County Department of Environmental Services. I read the letter to the director, Dr. Helen Reed. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice tight with anger, "that document is a complete fabrication. We have no Deputy Director Anderson. This woman has impersonated a government official." I called Sarah, my lawyer. "It's time," I said. "This is it," Sarah confirmed. "She's given you the perfect weapon. Alex, we know this order is fraudulent, but it is printed on official letterhead and demands immediate action to solve a declared emergency. If you ignore it and the storm hits, she could still try to sue you, claiming you defied an order and caused the flood." Sarah leaned in. "Our defense will be this. You are a former government employee who understands that when an emergency compliance order is issued, even a fake one, the law demands compliance until the order is officially revoked. Your professional duty is to obey. You are acting out of immediate legal necessity to protect yourself from liability. The one who issued the fraudulent order is the one who will be responsible for the damage it causes. You follow the order, but you document everything. It was a difficult choice. I knew that following the order would cause a flood, but I also knew that Barbara Klein was the one legally responsible the moment she forged that document. She created the danger with her illegal order. I made my decision. I would comply. I called Dr. Reed back at the county. I'm going to follow the order, I told her. But I need official documentation that I am acting under this fraudulent order. I need a real county inspector to witness it. I'll send my best inspector, Raymond Cross. He'll be there first thing in the morning, she promised. The next morning, the sky was gray and heavy with the promise of rain. I got my tools ready. Right on schedule, a county truck arrived. Raymond Cross, the inspector, shook my hand. Mr. Carter, I'm here to observe and document. Just then we heard vehicles. Barbara Klein's white Lexus led a small convoy up my road. She was wearing a hard hat and a fluorescent safety vest, a ridiculous costume of authority. A sheriff's deputy, who looked confused, stood behind her. Mr. Carter, Barbara announced loudly, I'm here to oversee compliance with the county's emergency order. I stayed calm. I walked over to the deputy. Officer, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page regarding the legal authority for this. I handed him my folder. This is the order I received. And this is a letter from the actual county director, Dr. Helen Reed, stating that this order is a fraudulent document. The deputy's eyes widened. Barbara's confidence cracked for a second. There seems to be some administrative confusion, officer. Perhaps we should postpone any action until we can sort this out. It's too late for that, I said, my voice calm but firm. The order says immediate action. As a former water scientist, I know that when there's a declared emergency, you don't wait. I am complying with the directive. I turned my back on her and walked to my pond. I picked up my shovel. Raymond Cross lifted his camera and started filming. For the next 2 hours, I worked. I opened channels to drain the pond. I used a pry bar to dismantle the small stone walls that guided the overflow. The clear, cold water that had been sitting peacefully began to flow faster and faster downhill, joining the main drainage channel that led toward Grandview Estates. Barbara Klein could only stand and watch, her face pale. She was silent, defeated by her own plan. By the time I was finished, the pond was empty. The spring water was now flowing unchecked, a steady stream heading down the mountain. And then the sky opened up. The storm arrived with incredible power. Within an hour, the stream from my spring became a rushing creek. Within 2 hours, it was a raging river of brown water, carrying mud and branches as it roared downhill. I sat in my cabin and listened. I knew what was happening below. The next morning, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. I walked down to the edge of my property and looked toward Grandview Estates. The neighborhood was underwater. The streets were rivers. The clubhouse was a wreck. Brown water surrounded it, halfway up the first-floor windows. Damage was later estimated at over $2 million. Emergency vehicles were everywhere. I walked up to the fire captain and handed her my folder. Captain, my name is Alex Carter. I own the land uphill. I believe this file will explain the cause of this flood. She opened it and saw the fake order, the county's letter confirming it was fake, and my timeline of compliance. Just then, Barbara Klein came running up. She was hysterical. Arrest him, she screamed, pointing at me. He's a terrorist. He flooded us on purpose. The fire captain turned to her. She held up the fraudulent order. Ma'am, did you create this document? Did you sign this order? Barbara stopped screaming. The truth was written all over her face. That's when the FBI showed up. Because Barbara had used the U.S. mail to send the fraudulent fine and had used electronic means to commit her forgery and fraud, it was a federal case. 2 agents in dark suits introduced themselves. They took my folder and my statement. They arrested Barbara Klein at her home that afternoon. The investigation that followed uncovered the whole scheme. They found evidence that Barbara had pressured other landowners. They found the financial records for the sanctuary project and proved that she had defrauded her investors by promising water rights she didn't own. Barbara Klein was charged with multiple federal crimes: wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery, impersonating a government official, and conspiracy. Facing decades in prison, she pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay millions of dollars in restitution. As expected, the homeowners of Grandview Estates filed massive civil lawsuits against me, claiming my draining of the pond was negligence. But my lawyer, Sarah, was ready. She presented the evidence of the fraudulent order, Raymond Cross's official documentation, and the county director's letter. She argued that Alex Carter, a former federal scientist, was compelled by law to comply with an emergency directive presented as a legal county order. By forcing me to drain the pond under false pretenses, Barbara Klein, and therefore her company, was the sole proximate cause of the disaster. We won every single lawsuit. The courts agreed that I was a victim of the fraud, not the perpetrator of the flood. The Grandview Estates community was devastated, but they recovered. They voted to remove Barbara as president and elected a new, honest board. The new board came to me and apologized for everything that had happened. We decided to work together. I helped them design a new, functional drainage system that could handle heavy rain. They rebuilt the clubhouse on higher ground. My spring continues to flow, and I rebuilt my pond better and stronger than before. Today, I still live at Hawk's Perch. The whole experience taught me a valuable lesson. You should always stand up for what is right. You should always know your rights. And sometimes the best way to defeat a bully is not to fight them directly, but to use their own power against them. You let them make the mistake that destroys their own plans. Justice, like water, always finds its way. It might take time, but it always finds its level. If you believe in standing up for yourself and protecting what's yours, hit that like button. And subscribe to Winds of Thought for more real stories about people who faced powerful opponents and won.